Well, good morning. It is a pleasure to get to be with you all this morning and really just this summer. It's been great getting to be back and getting to spend time with you and see your faces. I've missed y'all since I've been gone. So I love you all very much. And I'm very thankful for this time that we have. So actually 2 years ago tomorrow, I was on Camp Friends tour and I had the blessing of getting to go to a ton of different national parks with the group that I was with. So one of the parks that we went to was the Great Sand Dunes National Park in Colorado. So I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with it or if you've been, but it is the most awkward looking place. Like, just imagine these 1,000-foot, 2,000-foot, 3,000-foot tall dunes of sand in the middle of nowhere, Colorado. It's kind of one of those things, it's like you walk up to it and you're just like, that's odd. I don't know why God put that there, but he did. But it's still beautiful, though. It's Colorado, so it's beautiful. So if you haven't been, you should definitely go. So the group I was with, we had 1 day there, and we had 2 missions while we were there. Number 1, we wanted to sandboard, which is pretty much like sledding. So it's awesome, and with sand. So that's a little worse, And then 2, we wanted to hike up or walk up to the highest dune for sunset, which was pretty cool. So we rent boards and we make our way to the dunes. And we kind of make it to like these foothills of it, these small hills, and we start going down, doing our thing, sledding, having a good time. And then as the day is going on, we've done that for a couple of hours now, and it's starting to get a little closer to sunset. We're like, all right, it's time. Let's start making our way up to the peak for sunset. So I think one person in my group had actually been, but they'd never actually been up there. So we had no idea actually how to get up there. So we're just kind of looking around. There's no map. There's no guide. But what we did have is we had the footsteps and the footprints of people who had already walked up to guide us. So, no map or no guide, but we had people who had walked before us to lead our way. And I think the same applies for our Christian lives as well. We have our starting point, and we have the destination that we want to get to. We want to get to heaven, but how do we get there? But we've had the footsteps and the path walked for us. Christ came, and he lived his life for us, and we see the apostles and other amazing men and people who have walked before us. And we have their footsteps right here. And I just love this analogy of walking that's used in the Bible. And it's used for a way for us to live our lives. Our walk is how we live our lives and what we align ourselves with that will guide us. So if you turn to Deuteronomy 5:33, just a couple of passages, just to look at how the Bible uses walking. So Deuteronomy 5:33, it reads, "Walk in obedience to all that the Lord your God has commanded you, so that you may live and prosper and prolong your days in the land that you possess." And then Micah 6:8, it says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And then Romans 6:4, it says, "Therefore you have been buried with him through baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in the newness of life." And then my personal favorite, and as David just read, in Ephesians 4:1, "Therefore I, a prisoner of the Lord, implore you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called." And so Ephesians is really, we're going to spend some time this morning looking at how we walk. But first of all, we have to look at why we walk in the first place. So in Ephesians 4, it starts off with "therefore." So I think it's kind of like a preacher cliche thing to say it, but it's like, all right, if you see "therefore," look before. So we have to look before. So if you go to Ephesians 1, and actually first, a little background on Ephesians. Ephesians is kind of like a 2-part series. You have your first 3 chapters, which are the call, which we're going to explore in a moment, and that's what God has done for us. And then we have the second part, which is 4 through 6, which is our walk. And that's how we respond to the call and we respond to what God has done for us. So go to Ephesians 1. Spend a couple of minutes there. Ephesians 1, starting in verse 3, says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places." And it says, "Even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we might be holy and blameless before him. And then he predestined us for adoption to himself." And then moving down, "In him we have redemption," verse 7, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of his grace, which he lavished upon us in all wisdom and insight, making known to us the mystery of his will." And what is that mystery? In verse 10, "As a plan for the fullness of time, to unite all things in him, in heaven and on earth." And then in chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "And you were dead in the trespasses and sins in which you once walked, following the course of this world." But then moving to verse 4, "But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he has loved us, even when we are dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved." So this first part is just laying out all of these. This is what God did for you that you can't do for yourself. He chose us. But he chose us before the foundations of the world were set. And then he predestined us for adoption. He gave us all of these blessings. He even led us into the mystery of his will, and that's to unite all things in heaven and on earth through Christ. He saved us, and glory to his name for that. So that's what God has done for us. And because of that, because of this call, we now are to walk worthy of that calling. So we're really going to spend time in Ephesians 5. We'll come back to Ephesians 4 a little bit. But Ephesians 5 is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, and it's definitely my favorite in Ephesians. And I love it because it has 3 walk statements, and they're really easy to remember. But it's walk in love, walk in light, walk in wisdom. So we walk in love, we walk in light, and we walk in wisdom. So let's explore that. So Ephesians 5, starting in verse 1, starting with walking in love. "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, as Christ loved us, and gave himself up for us, a fragrant sacrifice, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." First thing that comes out, we're to be imitators of God as beloved children. And that idea of children imitating their parent, that's not new to us. I'm sure all of you have received, at least at some point in your life, someone hitting you with, you do something or you say something and they hit you with, "That was just like your dad," or "That was just like your mom." I mean, I get that all the time. All the time. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but it's not new to us. We all do that because that's who we spend the most time around. They're kind of the ones who brought you into this world. So we imitate our parents. But we aren't just to adore how Christ lived and how he walked, but we're to actually imitate that. And there's action behind that. And we're called to walk in love. So again, looking at verse 2, walking in love. "And walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." That's kind of daunting to think about, right? Kind of daunting to look at. It's like, Christ did all of these amazing things. We kind of see his highlight reel of life almost. We see him heal people. We see him raise Lazarus from the dead. We see him call the apostles together. We see him literally flip the world in the course of history by dying on a cross for us. It's like, how are we supposed to do that? Because we don't get those big moments typically. We're not really out here getting all these moments like you see like a mom, or you hear a story on the news of like a mom who gets pumped on adrenaline and lifts a car to save her kid. Like, we don't see those, and we don't get those moments. Or, You see someone walking down the street and there's a car coming and they don't see it, so you're like, all right, it's my time. So you start running, you push them out of the way, and you lay down your life for them. We don't get those moments. But when we really look at Christ's life, what I want us to think about is think about his day-to-day life. Think about the small moments that we don't see. The times of travel that they had. Think about all the small moments of love and sacrifice in his life. Maybe it was all the apostles are sitting together and they're running out of food, and Jesus is sitting right next to Matthew, and he lets Matthew have the last bit of food so that he can be filled, but he's still left hungry. Or maybe, when he's growing up, Mary's trying to lift something, and he runs over, and he's like, let me help you. Like, I'll lift this for you. Or maybe it was the times where he was just extra patient. Like, the disciples are probably getting on his last nerves. They're not listening, but he's extra patient because he's more focused on what they'll become rather than what they are. Christ's life was filled with a lot of tiny moments of love and sacrifice too. But we see this throughout the Bible. We know that Jesus values tiny things that we do for him and we do out of love. When you look at the widow's mite in Mark 12:41 through 44. Mark 12:41 through 44. It reads, "And he sat down opposite the treasury, and he watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him, and he said to them, 'Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all of those who are contributing in the offering box.'" I think it was Scott who preached this lesson, but on this, and I'm not sure, sorry if it was someone else, but he described what these offering boxes would have looked like. They're these big metal boxes that are designed to make noise. They're designed to make noise so that people could hear, and all right, these rich people are just dumping in coins. I mean, it probably sounded like one of those coin machines in Kroger, when someone comes in and just dumps all of it in. But that's what it would have been like, and people would have seen that, and people probably would have given even more to be seen. But what does he point out? Out of all of that noise, he points out the 2 small copper coins. Of all the noise, probably just a little tink, tink, and that's it. But that's what he notices, and that's what he calls out. God appreciates small things. I met a guy this last summer at a camp in Arkansas. It was kind of like a weird experience. I was getting water, and he was the dude filling up waters. He's probably 6'3", skinny, probably in his 60s. I tried to introduce myself, and he didn't really say anything. It was just kind of awkward. So I was like, all right, see ya. So I didn't really talk to him the rest of the week, but he's kind of like mystery man to me now. So I was like, all right. I want to know this guy. So I didn't really talk to him the rest of the week. But at church in Arkansas that next Sunday, I'm walking around and I see him, and I'm like, all right, here's my chance. I'm going to meet this guy. So we are talking to people, and then we kind of make it to each other and go to shake his hand, and he grabs my hand and kind of pulls me in close, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, this is weird. But he starts to whisper to me, which I thought was really interesting. And so talking to him a little bit more, what I came to find out is he lost his voice, which you don't think about losing your voice. We all talk, I'm talking right now. We don't really think, that this goes away sometimes. But it did for him. And not because of any I've just been screaming a lot, so I lost my voice, but I lost my voice. My voice is gone. He whispers. His daily life is whispering, which was hard on him because he was a public speaker, professional public speaker for a living, and he preached. That was his way of serving, was preaching and leading in that way, and now that was gone. He didn't have that. So as I'm talking to him more and I'm getting to know him, I finally asked him, I was like, how do you serve now? How have you kind of adapted to this new way of life? And what he says always stuck with me. He just looked at me and he was like, I can still lift things. I can still lift things. I don't know, I love that attitude. The attitude of, I'm going to give whatever I have. Whether how small it is or unseen, I'm going to give. And so we can all still lift things. Next example that we have of Christ. We have the example of walking in love in tiny moments and big moments. And you know what? Most likely, our life is not going to be made of big, drastic moments of love, and our walk is not going to be in these big leaps and lunges of love and sacrifice. But they're going to be characterized, our walk is going to be characterized by small, consistent acts of love that make up a lifetime. Now, moving on from that, in Ephesians verse 3 now. Now we see the contrast of love. And it reads, "But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper for the saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure, or who is covetous, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ or God." Look back at verse 3, which is proper for the saints. The contrast to walking in love is walking in a way and living in a way that is not proper. It's because of the call that we have, because of the new life that we have, we're to walk in a way that's proper. But we're not supposed to walk in a way that's unfit, that's inappropriate. When you're looking at this list of different things, yes, it's sexual immorality and impurity. And then we see covetousness, which kind of like pops out, like doesn't really fit right there, it seems like. But there's a definition that I like of that, which is an abnormally large focus. An abnormally large focus. So, the contrast to walking in love is walking in selfishness and sin and having an abnormally large focus on the things of this world and what brings us pleasure rather than loving and sacrificing for others. But the thing about our walk is that the longer we do things, the more ingrained they become and the easier they become. So going back to Ephesians 4, verse 19, it reads, "They become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity." The longer that we walk in the things that we walk in, the easier that they become. Because that's how we get calluses, right? It's by friction on a point. So it builds up our skin to protect against that. Our conscience, it doesn't see our conscience as much anymore. It becomes easier and it becomes easier. And we can fall into that if we're not careful. Now, walking in light. Go down to verse 8. So we have walking in love, now walking in light. "For at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light." In order to walk in light, we first have to recognize and realize the darkness from which we came from. So really, look at the wording there. Go back. It's not that you were in darkness. It's not that just by circumstance, you're in this place and there's darkness around you, and I'm just kind of taking part in a little bit of it. It's you were darkness. It was our nature. Christ has created a new nature for us. He brought us out of darkness because we were darkness, and we're to walk now in light. So if we're not actively walking in light, we're actually working against the light. And this idea we see in Matthew 12, when he's kind of getting called out by the Pharisees. If he just cast out a demon and a guy, and they're like, well, it's only by, like Satan. If Satan casts out this demon, like the king of demons can cast out this demon, and Christ is like, that doesn't really make sense. He's like, if a kingdom, in verse 25, if a kingdom is divided against itself, it can't stand. And then he moves down and he's like, whoever's not with me is actually against me, and whoever doesn't gather with me scatters. So we see this idea, if we're not actively walking with Christ, if we're not actively walking in light and in love, then we're actually working against it, and we're walking in darkness. So there's no middle ground. And then we see in verse 9, it says, "For the fruit of light is found in all that is good, right, and true." We see that walking in love produces something, and it produces good fruits. It produces things that are good. It produces things that aren't right, and it produces lies. So when we're actively walking in light, we've given our life to Christ, and now we're walking this way, it actually produces something. It produces good fruit. And then in verse 10, another aspect of walking in the light. It reads, "And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord." Walking in the light is a lifetime commitment to pursuing God and pursuing what is pleasing to Him. Again, it's not just that we're learning about Him. We're not just reading, which obviously we're supposed to read the Bible, that we learn what's pleasing to Him, but we put it in practice. We actually do something with it. He's given this to us, but if we're not doing anything with it, then what's it worth, you know? We actually have to produce fruit with it. And then another aspect of walking the light in verses 11 through 14 reads, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful to even speak of the things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light." We have to be with each other. And we have to be light to each other and all of those around us. This body that we have here, this is one of the greatest blessings that we have on this side of eternity. But it is also one of the easiest things to take for granted as well. Because it's easy to come here for 4 hours a week or 3.5 hours a week. Quick math. 3.5 hours a week. Really easy to come here for 3.5 hours a week. Worship together, pray together, learn together, talk, encourage. And then when we walk out the doors, no one hears from you for 5 days. That can be easy, and that can be really tempting. But we have to be careful who we're surrounding ourselves with. We have to surround ourselves with each other and bring light into each other's lives. Because it talks about, in verse 12, it's the things that they do in secret. Those are the things that are shameful. And honestly, that's one of Satan's biggest tools. Satan's biggest tools is privacy and secrecy. And I think kind of our culture puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage in this way, because America is all about my life, my rights, my privacy. And it's all about me. But we've been called to walk together. We've been called to be light, yes, to the world, but in each other's lives. And that starts by we have to invite people into our lives. The most beautiful thing is being known by people. That is such a blessing. So being in the light is being known by people and pursuing knowing other people as well. So we have walk in love and walk in light. Now we move on, and if you go to verse 14, it reads, "Awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ's light will shine on you. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." Now that we're walking in the light, we can now be awake. We can now be alert and intentional about how we walk. It's kind of like sleepwalking. You know, you wake up from a deep sleep, and your eyes are still halfway shut. You're still pretty much unconscious and trying to walk to like the kitchen or something. And you get up, and you're kind of dazed, and you're just kind of stumbling around, and then, you stub your toe. Stub your toe is the worst. Or you hit your knee on something. Maybe your kid left out a Lego, and you step on that Lego. That's like the worst pain in the world. Maybe it's your Legos. We could settle this now, actually. Legos, they are cool for adults, too. It says 7 and up, and there's a plus sign for a reason. They're still cool. Steve knows. They're still cool. But it's like walking in the dark. It's like being unconscious. We can't look carefully if we're not awake. And then it says, so the foundation of this, now that we're awake and now that we're alert and we can be intentional about how we're walking, look at verse 16. Making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. It starts, we got to recognize that our days are numbered. And I know that's like the thing to say, like, days are numbered, Lord willing about tomorrow. But every minute, every hour, and every day that we have, that is a gift from God. We have to be careful how we use that. Because the opposite of being intentional is being purposeless and aimless. If you look back at the story of David and Bathsheba, David is only in the position to see Bathsheba because it says in the spring when kings were supposed to be out to battle. But where was David? He was on his couch. And then probably bored, so he gets up and he's just walking around and he sees Bathsheba. If we're walking aimlessly and if we're walking without purpose, evil will find its way into our days and into our lives. It's just the world we live in, unfortunately. Our culture, you can't get on your phone or social media or whatever. You can't scroll without seeing some kind of evil. We can't be numb and we can't just be purposeless, but we have to be intentional about how we're walking. We have to understand what the will of the Lord is. Verse 17, therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. The only way we get that is by spending time in the Word, by making this a priority. And when we start to look carefully and realize our days are numbered, our priorities start to get in line a little bit more. That's priority number one, to understand that days are numbered. So I got to be careful here. So how we spend our time is so incredibly precious. This is number one. We have to understand what the will of the Lord is. And we get it through His Word and spending time with Him. So we have walk in love, we have walk in light, and we have walk in wisdom. So just two takeaways, and then it can be yours, I guess, is how they say it. 2 takeaways. Number 1, our walk is going to require a constant course correction. I was sitting in a Bible class my freshman year at Temple Terrace, and Jonathan Banning said this, that has always stuck with me. He said, Christianity, and I love how it rolls off the tongue, Christianity is a constant course correction. Christianity is a constant course correction. And we're not perfect, unfortunately, and if you haven't figured that out, well, welcome to reality. We are not perfect. All of us have failed, and all of us are going to require course correction. And we're not going to be perfect in walking in love, and we're not going to be perfect at walking in light or in wisdom. But what matters is that we have the ability to choose. God has given us the ability to choose to get back up and to keep going and to ask to be renewed and to ask to be rebuilt and refreshed in Him. So ask Him for that. When you're stumbling, just get on your knees, pray, say, I need correction, and I need you to outline the path and the course for me. We serve a faithful God, and He will answer. Number 2, our walk isn't just about us. When you look at the book of Ephesians, yes, it's about the call and what God has done for us. Yes, it's about how we respond to that call and how we walk. But Ephesians is about unity. Our walk is for each other. In Ephesians 4, verse 1 through 6, what David read earlier, now this I say and testify in the Lord that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding. Oh, sorry, guys. I was on the wrong verse. I, therefore, a prisoner of the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, and with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace, because there is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope that belongs to your call, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. Jesus didn't come just to be our personal Savior and forgive us of our sins. But what he came to do was to remove sin, to remove our impediment that stops us from glorifying him and bringing others to him. His plan and the mystery that was revealed to us, Ephesians 1, was to unite all things in heaven and earth. And we get to be a part of that. And how we walk helps achieve that. It's not just about us. So that's 3 steps. Walk in love, walk in light, and walk in wisdom. If you're here this morning and maybe you haven't started your walk, maybe you haven't even began to take the footsteps or the steps to be with Christ, or maybe you're on that walk, but you still feel like you're in darkness. You still feel like you are walking around aimless and purposeless. Or maybe you just need something. There are an abundance of people here who would love to listen to you and who would love to point you towards the greatest love, the greatest hope, and the greatest peace this world has ever seen in King Jesus.